So, Dr. Ron Hirschbein, thank you for talking with me from San Diego. I'm interested in what happens to people after retirement at Chico State. But let's go back a little bit.
So I can tell you we age disgracefully.
What did you major in as an undergrad?
In philosophy.
Duh. And where that was Syracuse?
No, that was Wisconsin.
Ah. And why did you pick philosophy?
It seemed like the most I tried Soch and a few other things, but actually I was intrigued by, even at age 17, by my existential problems, having to confront this idea of my own mortality, and I thought maybe I could get some reassurance that there was a God and that immortality was possible. I had an immortal soul. You would know about this from your studies at Santa Barbara, no doubt.
Right.
So it was an upper division course called Philosophy of Religion, and the professor's name was certainly appropriate. One of the best teachers I ever had, Dr. Riddle was his name, and did some work in the philosophy of religion. It was a very good experience. Had lots of social talks with him in his office, and right toward the end of the course, I was ready to take notes. A guy like this who studied the philosophy of religion all of his life, he's going to have some very, very esoteric creed. I was going to write it down and maybe get a book on it from the interlibrary. They said, "Well, yeah, I didn't want to tell this to the class early on, but I'm an Episcopalian," and that was a little disappointing in a way. But I wound up pretty much as an evangelical agnostic.
Were you bar mitzvah? Did you have a traditional or any?
Oh yeah, I had a shotgun bar mitzvah, but much to the everlasting shame of my parents, I flunked out of Hebrew school.
Oh gosh!
It was they gave me my foreskin back. It was very humiliating.
Does that mean you didn't want to do it, so you just didn't study?
You got that right. It was really a shotgun bar mitzvah. It was as if the Hebrew school had plotted to turn people off toward Judaism. It was very effective with me.
So, what did you conclude after your undergraduate studies about the meaning of life?
Well, I decided I couldn't solve those great cosmic questions, which left me as an agnostic. I guess that's somebody who believes that there is no God and marries his mother, or some such thing. But joke was funny when I heard it. Anyway, so I decided to turn my attention to more mundane, this-worldly matters. Got interested in war and peace studies and politics. Oh, excuse me. Yes.
And then, why did you decide to go on to grad school rather than be a stockbroker or something?
Oh, well, the draft, of course, encouraged me to stay in school, and I couldn't find anything really honest to do to avoid the draft, so academics seemed like the natural course of action.
And then, were you at Wisconsin for grad school as well?
No, I got my master's at Southern Illinois, where I had some very good teachers, including very prominent theologian Henry Nelson Wyman, who influenced me. But then that was a problem. Yeah, this goes back to blaming my parents for the shotgun bar mitzvah, which is the only decent thing to do. To get a Ph.D. there was a foreign language requirement, and I was already traumatized by trying to learn a foreign language in Hebrew school. I was doing okay in public school, and I don't know what's wrong with my throat today, Gail. Excuse me.
Get some water.
So,
Have Lee bring you some water.
I think I'm okay now. Oh, here she is.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Oh, you should bring me my mug from the Episcopal Church. I'll talk about that a little later. Anyway, back in school, yeah, so they had a foreign language requirement, and having flunked out of Hebrew school, I was doing okay in languages in the public school, in English, of course, and doing okay in mathematics, but I was really terrified that there'd be some ineffable Hebrew mathematics I couldn't understand. So I really had this thing about foreign language requirements. And there was none in this Ph.D. program in Syracuse, an interdisciplinary program in social science. So my Ph.D. is actually in social science. Oh, I combined three. Is this too much information?
No, it's great.
Okay. Okay, I combined three areas: philosophy, of course, politics, and religion. So I'm glad to have an interdisciplinary degree. I have some dilettante type of knowledge, I guess, in three fields, and in my teaching and research, I've delved into all these fields and tried to incorporate them. Call it a humanistic approach to social inquiry. Does that have some heaviosity?
Yeah. Well, it's applied philosophy. You know, how do we take concepts of meaning and apply them to whether we live or die, or kill people or don't kill people? You know.
Well spoken. Yeah. What got you, if I may ask, what got you into religious studies at Santa Barbara?
Well, I had a BA at Berkeley and an MA in UCLA in U.S. history, and I taught that in public school, and I got bored teaching U.S. history for 5 years. Yeah. So I had always been interested in Hinduism and Buddhism and spirituality. My mother was as well. And then I started teaching a religion class at the high school where I taught.
Awesome.
And, I really liked teaching it. And then I went to Europe when I was, I guess, 24, 25. And I had jet lag coming back. And I thought, I'm bored. I'm going to apply to get a master's in religious studies at UC Santa Barbara. And luckily they let me in because I quit my job. I don't know what I would have done. And had a great time. Religious studies is great because there's so many different areas that you can study, east, west, this and that. Right. So it it had philosophy and history of religion. It was never boring.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, all the years I've known you, I've never really asked that much about your background. So this is really good to hear.
So what did you do your dissertation on for your PhD?
I took 4 or 5 courses with this theologian, Henry Nelson Wyman, and now I was at Syracuse, and initially I was going to do it on the free speech movement at Berkeley, but it meant working with this professor there who was a real schmuck. So I got along very well with the chair of the religion department. Well, this was the time, maybe you know about this, when I was at Syracuse, this was the time of the Death of God movement.
I don't know about it.
A lot of us didn't even know he was sick, but in any case, this was Bill Hall, who was a major professor, and I'd gotten along so well with Wyman. He was always so supportive, and I thought I would apply some of his ideas of creativity to issues in metaethics and
existentialism.
Existentialism, right. And it was opportunistic also because, again, he was so supportive. I would send him a draft, and he'd write back saying, Ron, this is really great. I like the way you're advancing, and so forth. So what's the PhD committee going to do? They're going to say, well, how do you know you understand Wyman? Because, well, here's a letter from him. And I got through the PhD dissertation rather effortlessly. It wasn't a complete waste of time. I mean, he has some important ideas regarding ethics and creativity and these meaning of life issues. But he was a really inspiring guy. This is where I first heard my opposition to the Vietnam War, too, from some of his talks. He was great. He was teaching in his late 80s and very robust and very sharp. I still remember going to his office one day, and I heard that he was going to retire. So I said, how are you going to retire? And he gave me these lamentations about aging and what happens to old folks. So I said, yeah, my wife's parents are really getting on. I think they're over 100 now, and we have to go back to Iowa to take care of the old folks. Very inspiring guy, one of the few inspiring professors I had.
I want to tell you my dissertation thesis story quickly.
Sure.
It was not easy because the religious studies people wanted an outside professor on my committee. It was about 19th century religion, and so we added a history professor. And I went down there for my defense, and they asked me, all the religious studies asked me questions. I answered, it was fine. And then when we got to this guy, Professor Kelly, he said, "Well, I didn't prepare any questions because I don't think you've done enough work, and
Oh,
I want you to write about each of the cities where Harriet Beecher Stowe, who I was writing about, lived. And so go away and write them up, and then we'll do this again."
it's kind of obstructionistic, isn't
Well,
it?
later he wrote to me. I wish I had saved this. He said that he was very uncomfortable with women in academia. So
Oh, I guess I'm uncomfortable with women, but for other reasons. Or I should say they're uncomfortable with me. And this is the time for Lee to talk about how wonderful I am. But she remains silent. You want to hear my quick story?
Yeah.
In our anecdotage.
Yeah.
Well, taking the Ph.D. exams at Syracuse in these three areas, um, I'd worked with a very good professor in politics, and what he had done, he had some fellowship or something at Oxford, so he left before leaving the exam for me. So I had to go around the halls at Syracuse and find somebody to give me a PhD exam, particularly in politics. So I still remember there was a question on comparing and contrasting Rousseau and Marx. Now, I was somewhat conversant with Marx. It was the 60s after all. But Rousseau, dim memories from undergraduate days. So I did the only honorable thing and really bullshit about Rousseau, carrying on saying, well, in terms of the Rousseauian corpus, considerable scholarly ink is spilled in terms of whether we find a physiocratic strain in this, or is there more of a Humean work, a kind of skepticism. So I'm carrying on like this, just really making up things. So anyway, sometime later I got a letter from, this was when they actually used the post and mail, way back in the 60s. So I got a letter from him and said, oh, shit, they're really going to nail me on Rousseau. Now, this guy who gave me the politics question had written his dissertation on Rousseau at Berkeley. So it began, well, you're all right with Marx, you know, but I have a lot of questions about Rousseau. However, that said, I've never seen such thoroughgoing knowledge of the literature before on Rousseau. So I got through.
That's a great story.
Apparently, this guy impressed easily. I should be ashamed of the story, but I guess at this late date, it doesn't make a lot of difference.
No, it's like a game. I always thought it's like they put a hoop through in front of you, you jump through. I had to have 4/4 of German, I jumped through. You know, they just put hoops, you jump, and that's the game.
I remember it well.
So, how did you find a job at Chico State? Did you want to go to California? How did that come to you?
Well, after I got my degree, the first wife and I, first wife is also a PhD in philosophy. So we decided we'd look for great job opportunities. And she got an offer at San Diego State. And after spending a very dismal winter in Syracuse, San Diego sounded very appealing, as it does now, of course. So a colleague of hers said, well, I had to find a job because of the draft. It was an occupational deferment. So it was kind of iffy at San Diego State. But I saw this job advertised at Chico's, about the closest I could get to San Diego. So I took the job in Chico in '68, and the rest is my sordid history, I guess.
Well, how did you do a commuter marriage? Because that's San Diego and Chico are far.
With difficulty, and maybe that's one of the impediments to our marriage. Is why maybe we split up. There are all kinds of other reasons that I still don't understand, but.
Did she ever come and live in Chico, or you ever lived?
Yeah, she lived in Chico for a year, and the people in my department were real schmucks. They were very sexist, and they said they didn't need. You wouldn't know anything about that, I'm sure. But, they said that, well, the idea of having another woman in the department wasn't too congenial to them, so
they actually said that.
She took a job at Lewis and Clark College, which was a very nice job.
So
I went up there and taught for a year too, but things just didn't work out.
Was Dorothy Hacker in your department then?
Oh yeah, I really liked Dorothy.
Was she the only woman?
At the time, yeah.
So to have your first wife and Dorothy would be too much?
Oh, way too much. Yeah, in fact, one guy said we already have too many women in the department. There are maybe 12 people, and having 2 women was just...
Interesting. People wouldn't say that anymore today. They might think it, but they wouldn't say it.
Yeah, my nemesis in the department, of course. One of the reasons for denying me tenure, he wrote a 26-page tome about why I shouldn't get tenure. It had a lot to do with my activity in the anti-war movement and my anti-authoritarian personality. But he mentioned that I had proposed a course in black philosophy, or African-American philosophy, and he said, well, if you wanted to have a course in black tap dancing or black pugilism, that would be all right. But
wow,
I didn't get along very well with this guy.
Do you want to say who it is?
Well, he's long gone to his heavenly reward. His name was Marvin Easterling, but that was a long time ago. Well, this was back in my heroic youth in 1972, so he lived some time after that.
But then you eventually got tenure.
I did, because I had very incompetent colleagues, and I also, they bullshitted a bit about consulting attorneys, and they were going to get busted, and I knew my rights, and so I actually had some allies supporting me too, of course.
And you were involved with the teachers' union.
Oh yeah.
And
I had any grievances for
me.
Well, I had one of your grievances.
Yeah, it was. You saved my job. What happened is
the women in ethnic studies. That's right. Yeah.
The provost, Don Girth, who later became president at Sac State, he was out to get me, and he knew that I had a religious studies Ph.D. So he said to me, "You better start praying." And I said, "She's listening." And he goes, he wasn't expecting a she.
Yeah, he gave assholes a bad name, I think, really. I remember he calling me, telling me that why I shouldn't expect to get tenure, and why it was a good thing to deny my tenure, and so forth. Well, they came up with a compromise to please some of my adversaries. They would deny tenure, or they'd give me tenure but deny a promotion. So I went quite a few years without a promotion. Imagine somebody as deserving as I.
Well, you checked the boxes. Good teaching evaluations. Students loved you. Published.
Well, of course, how I can tell you this from handling grievances as if you don't know, but the good student evaluations were a sign that I was a popularizer and not serious, and I was just pandering to students.
Wow.
And bad teaching evaluations are also a sign that you're no good. So your adversaries, of course, will put you in a no-win situation.
Absolutely. And then what you argued that succeeded for me and people in my department was you can't add requirements for tenure after the fact, because then you could just keep adding impossible requirements.
Oh, you had a grievance case about that.
Yeah, and it was they said you could only have tenure if you had a different department affiliation, not just ethnic and women's studies.
Your case is coming back to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't have that, so he was going to fire me.
I remember this was Charles Adams who was my adversary, and I remember some of the hearings where I was talking about this retroactive requirement of Adams, and I called it. Oh yeah, and Don Hines was on the panel too, so he appreciated this. I said, I'm going to talk here about Adam's original sin, having these retroactive requirements.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think Don may have appreciated my.
So the CSU system is kind of famous for teaching 4 classes a semester, requiring writing books and articles, getting good evaluations, doing community work, being on committees. Whereas the UC professors, they have much lighter teaching loads. So I wonder how you handle that. Plus having a family, and I know you like to garden and run. How did you handle all that?
Well, actually, it wasn't. I don't know if you want to talk about the difference between the state colleges and the UC system. How much time do we have here?
As much as you want.
Oh, okay. Well, the difference I noticed, of course, down in Berkeley, in terms of the restrooms, they had full rolls of toilet paper. But for a long time, when did you come to Chico State?
Long time ago. Did you teach at Berkeley?
Yeah, I had a visiting professorship there. But anyway, I used to spend my summers there. Anyway, they had these full rolls of Chico State. They just had these little sheets. I'm not quite familiar how you got your sheet together in the women's room, but one day there was a change, and Chico State got rolls of toilet paper reflecting the envy of the UC system. We're just as good now because we can be just as wiped out as the people in the UC system. So I was always fascinated. I always wanted to learn about the meeting that they had where they made this decision to change toilet paper. Can you imagine there were subcommittees and heavily paid people saying, we think this one sheet of toilet paper costs 2.4 mils, but a roll would, so they're going to those costs. And so much for my perverse interest. It would make it an amusing study, but I digress just a little bit.
So what was it like teaching at Berkeley?
Well, the students were a lot sharper, and I had colleagues with whom I could share my interests. I was writing my book on international crises at the time. The students were just as irresponsible in terms of meeting your deadlines. But it was still an enjoyable experience and great resume padding for later on.
But so the question was, how did you handle all that? Teaching, family, health.
Well, I wish I had spent more time. The first book was around 1984, and my son was born, and I was so enthusiastic about getting a book contract and getting some narcissistic nutrients from publishing that I really wish I had spent more time with him when he was very young. Eventually, I could get some sabbaticals and some time off from research and managed to do it. Well, you had the same issues, of course, so what's your secret? You've been very active publishing.
I think part of it was that my son's dad and I separated when he was young, so I would always have, like, all day Saturday he was with his dad, and I would do nothing but write, do research, that kind of thing. And I didn't answer the phone, I didn't clean the house, I just did that. And then, of course, we have the summers and vacations and sabbaticals, but it's a lot. I mean, I still am fighting with that feeling that I haven't done enough, I haven't read enough, I haven't researched enough, I haven't done this or that enough, because you always kind of have a feeling of being behind.
I know, that feeling's haunted, just like you. I'm painfully empathetic here.
Yeah, And I think it starts in grad school too, because you have so much work.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of, well, when I was a senior undergrad at Berkeley, I had a history seminar, and she gave us a book a week to read, and plus articles to read. I didn't have time to do all that, so I learned to skim. You know,
Yeah.
you learn how to save time by like skimming reading, or I know when they, oh, the other thing my department did at Santa Barbara for my dissertation is they added an English professor, and she gave me a whole bunch of books to read for my dissertation while I'm teaching at Chico State. So I went to my friend Betsy Urkula, who taught English. I said, do you have any of those little summary guides of books? And
Yeah.
she gave them to me, and I just wrote our essays based on those little guides.
Yeah, what we had to do to get through it. Well, again, I was so opportunistic. Writing a dissertation on this guy Wyman and getting his letters of enthusiastic support. What are the schmucks on the committee going to say about this?
Yeah.
So I made the right choice.
Yeah, and that makes a point that they're impressed by who has status in the university. So this Professor Kelly was on the faculty senate. He had status, so they kind of kowtowed to him. And
Yeah, this Wyman had an interesting policy in Southern Illinois. They would hire very distinguished professors from the elite universities. Wyman had been, I guess there was a retirement age in Chicago. He'd been chair of the divinity school at the University of Chicago. So they're not going to give him a lot of criticism about, especially since I'm writing about his own work. Say, well, are you sure you understand what
Wyman
well,
said
yeah,
I
he
did.
says I do. I mean, does it get better than that?
Yeah.
So I got through quick and dirty, yeah.
So how many years did you end up teaching at Chico State?
It was about 33 years.
Did you see any?
A few of the times I got it right, too.
Did you see any changes in the students? Like
I did, yeah. When I first came there, students seemed a little bit more serious, a little bit more involved in the class. And, of course, the 60s, a heavily politicized time. So they were taking quite personally being so vulnerable to the draft. The quality and interest of the students seemed to deteriorate. That said, there was always a constant. When did you first come to Chico?
Long time ago. I don't even remember.
You don't want to say. Well, if I had talked to you when I first came in '68, I said, well, you know, Gail, I think about 10% of the class is there, and they're interested and they have a near life experience. For the other 90%, I could be talking about Aristotle's metaphysics books, Gamma through Lambda, as if I actually knew anything about this. Or we could be having nude hot tub encounters, but it wouldn't make any difference at all. And then so the 10%, 90% ratio seemed to be the case throughout my career there. Very strange occupation. I don't know what it was like for you, but had I gone into a different field, say been an accountant or an attorney, once thought about being an attorney, had I been an attorney, and I said, well, you know, I've got our 10 o'clock, I can't even talk. We've got our 10 o'clock appointment, but I'm canceling our appointment. Well, the client would be disappointed, probably very angry. But have you ever had the experience of counseling a class, and did you find the students needed grief counseling?
No, I didn't. I was so compulsive, I didn't cancel.
Well, when classes were canceled, sometimes for legitimate reasons, sometimes because I wanted to get down to Yosemite to see the falls. But
That's called mental health.
yes, that's right. So they were always ecstatic. Yes, the class is canceled. Yes. So it was a great deal of enthusiasm. So for a time, you were probably going to ask about what prompted my retirement at a very tender age of 58. I was starting to feel like I was a daycare provider for kids 18 to 24.
Hmm.
And this notion that, with some very notable exceptions, I do want to talk about that, but with some notable exceptions, most of the students didn't much care and they'd rather not be there, and they were happy if the class were canceled. And I did what I could. You know me, I usually have something to offend everybody, and you don't have to be so quick to agree. But it was kind of discouraging. So the retirement package was good, and I imagine you went through the FERP program yourself. So the extra money was great for putting the kid through college, and that gave me teaching in effect half time, gave me more time for my writing projects. Hard to believe, Gail. I was actually formally retired 21 years ago. I went back to teach a couple of times, even I think it was just 2 years ago, teaching one class.
At Chico State?
Yeah, same experience again. And the department was different, but even the old colleagues weren't effusively congenial and didn't exactly welcome me back, so it wasn't such a good experience.
Why do you think that decay in their motivation and academic interest has happened? Any wild ideas?
Oh, a question many people ask. It's tempting to talk about well, this is kind of circular. Become quite interested in the new varieties of anti-intellectualism in the culture, how the life of the mind is derided, the influence of various forms of entertainment, TV, and then of course the internet. So, book I used in class quite consistently was maybe even know Neil Postman's "Amusing Ourselves to Death."
No, that sounds interesting.
It's an excellent book, and there, the overarching concern, he thought, of America, and particularly of proverbially young people, was being entertained, being amused, and the life of the intellect was not only minimized but really derided.
And did he attributes that mainly to media?
Yeah, he's a preeminent critic of TV.
So it's kind of like we get seduced or corrupted or addicted to that kind of fast-paced entertainment, kind of a...
Yeah, I've got to go to my TV shows coming on, but no, I'm serious. We'll talk some more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you taught in other universities after you retired, where you were doing it online?
Oh, yeah. At the subprime university, Walden, over the internet.
What was that like?
Well, it was way too impersonal for me, and my anti-authoritarian personality, this idea that you were supervised by your betters and classes monitored and made sure you showed up. However, well, as in Chico State, despite my rather snide remarks, there were some very memorable students. In fact, I dedicated one book to one of these students, and these exceptional students were easily as sharp as the students I've encountered at Berkeley or teaching at the UN University in Austria when I did that. And in Walden, I had a student who would become, please know about my best friend. We were writing this book together. He took my class, and what I would do sometimes is call up these people and make it more personal if they were particularly interesting. So I called up this guy and said, "Hey, Amin, from your writing, you really sound like a Jewish mother. What is it with you?" He said, "No, I'm an Arab man." And we were very close friends now, of course, writing this book together. And the guy who was my supervisor, who turned out to have the decency to be alienated from Walden, Dick and I became good friends, and he's come out here to visit me in San Diego, and we have good times talking together. So it wasn't all a jaundiced experience, but the internet is way too impersonal. And although sometimes you get students who were really wanted to be engaged. Oh yeah, I remember one guy who, the Army colonel, Kevin, we weren't exactly on the same page politically, but he was a very bright guy, and we became rather good friends too. So obviously I'm not sepia toning the experience at Walden. I resigned finally. I couldn't stand working for this person who was a dean. So I even pissed away a good salary and an easy job to do that. I have some regrets about that. But I did make some good friends.
Is Walden a for-profit university?
Oh, yes.
I taught a couple classes for University of Phoenix. It was unbelievably bad. The whole thing was keep the students in, so they pay their fees. So they had everything done as a group. So you could get by in a class with having somebody else write the paper, somebody else do the research, and you would, I don't know, be the copy editor. And then they gave them articles to read, no books. I think you could probably get through not having read a book and not having written a paper because of that group focus. And I tried to grade them like individuals for the work that I could see they'd done, and Phoenix did not like that.
No, it sounds painfully like Walden, too. And these rubrics you're supposed to follow as if they knew best how I was to teach my class, because I'd only been teaching for about 30 years. And what did I know?
Oh, they had that like it's the content was really scripted for you. This week we do this, and this week,
Yeah.
Right.
As you might imagine, knowing me, I improvised quite a bit.
Yeah, I did too. They didn't like that. So what are you doing now? What are you focusing on now in San Diego?
Well, finishing this writing project with my friend Amin, this latest book. We were ambushed. We didn't know there'd be a final review. But the final review came in, and it wasn't savage. There were a few picayune things and a few things that were more substantive. So the next few days, I'll be working on a review. This book is Jews. It's about conspiracism.
It's Jews and Muslims in the white supremacist imagination. Routledge is doing it, and it's supposed to come out this year.
We hope so. If I can get busy and finish responding to the review. My friend Amin is doing his part. As you might guess, I'm doing the section on. I don't like the term anti-Semitism, although it's the popular term. We've written articles about anti-Semitism. Do you know the origins of the term?
I don't.
Well, you'd think that some rabbis came up with the term and some shtetl in medieval times. The term was invented by a notorious Jew hater named Wilhelm Marr, and he invented the term to show that the Semitic race, and this was racializing Jews, had these almost satanic powers and the viciousness of the Semitic race. So he invented the term. So
when was that?
Jewish community still uses that term.
When roughly was that?
Huh?
When was that roughly?
It would have been in the 1880s, 1890s. So the origin of the term is rather inglorious. Anyway, I, of course, written about the conspiracism against Jews, and Amin knows more than he cares to about the conspiracies attributed to Muslims and Arabs. I don't know if you recall, a few years ago in North Carolina, there was a notorious incident where some Islamophobe murdered some graduate students. I don't know if you recall.
No.
His relatives, yeah.
They murdered them because they were Muslims. Oh.
Yeah.
They just picked some random people wearing hijab or something?
Well, no, it was in this apartment building, this student housing building, and apparently there was some dispute ostensibly about parking, but
Oh gosh.
this guy was a real hater, so he was, I think he was sent to life in prison finally. But me, generally just experienced prejudice against Jews. Use the terms in such anti-Semitism light. But in fact, generally I passed, so to speak, when I was, with the Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hired me as a spy when I was in college because they thought I could pass. You should give the expression as a Gentile. So,
A goy.
yeah, boy. So I had a prosthetic foreskin, and I was. So I used to go to different meetings, and there wasn't really much to report. Generally, it was very kindly elderly people, maybe having rallies about the flag, and. But I was I had a job as a spy for the Anti-Defamation League.
That's a great story. So what do you have a conclusion in the white supremacist imagination? Is it getting worse with the whole Trump era? Where are we headed with it?
Oh yeah, of course. We talk. What's really curious about this is conspiracism is rarely based in our studies on personal experience. We could understand it if, well, yeah, I hate Jews and Muslims because the Jews have these gangs that beat me up, and I'm very theological, and I think they killed Christ, and no, that's very rare. And the same thing with, Islam, of course, had 9/11. So the image of the Muslim changed from the magician, from the genie and the flying carpets. It changed to the terrorist after 9/11. But being conspiracist, in fact, maybe you might want to see this. I talk about the theology of white supremacism. One author argues, and I think quite rightly, that it's not based on any empirical evidence. There's nothing that can be falsified. It's a theology. Maybe the most telling thing is right in the introduction. I use this quote from an Atlantic article where talking about the role of the internet in all of this. Somebody wrote in, apparently a pretty young person wrote in and said, I'm really bored with my life. I can't find any meaning in my life. Things are just really dull and boring. Do you have any suggestions? Anybody here in my group have any suggestions? Yes. Why don't you write about conspiracism, and why don't you write about the conspiracies of Jewish pedophiles and how they're trying to take over the world? So we call attention to the need for, we call it recognition hunger, that you're going to be outstanding in your brotherhood. And it's palliative for boredom. It can be really exciting. And in the theology, we talk about kind of a new Gnosticism where, speaking of recognition, I've seen behind the curtain. I've got all the inside dope on these people. So I'm terribly important, and I know something you don't know. And I'm sure this sounds familiar in some of your religious studies.
What I'm curious about, that Trump has brought a lot of this, encouraged it to come to the forefront. But with a Jewish son-in-law and his daughter converted to Judaism, they're raising their kids as Jews. They follow the Sabbath on Friday nights, don't do work on Saturday. How does anti-Semitism work with the Trump regime?
Well, there's, I guess, what do you want to call it? There's a lot of cognitive dissonance in this. One quote we have is Trump is interviewed, and he's talking about, this is the 2016 campaign, he's going to do something about Hillary, who's in cahoots with the globalists and the international bankers. And he knows that George Soros has sponsored a lot of the agitation that's going on. So he's shameless enough to pander to this. One guy we write about is a guy named Mike Enoch, and this is I don't know if he still has that, but he had an internet site that's virulently Jew hatred, talking about, jokes about, isn't it time to make Jews in the lampshades again? There were sort of beyond cringeworthy attempts at humor. At the time, had a Jewish wife, who I guess somehow they didn't get along and divorced him for reasons that can't quite understand. But seriously, this idea of internet fame and recognition hunger trumps all these other concerns. And so it is with Trump himself, it seems to me, that, I'll appeal to the rubes with this not so carefully cloaked Jew hatred. But, nothing personal, Jared. It's... it's a tough one to understand, I know.
Is it getting worse just because there's more freedom to express it? It's more permissible because of Trump? Or has it always existed to this degree, but people were more cautious about speaking up?
Well, it's always existed, going way, way back to the ancient blood libels against Jews in the medieval world, which have been resurrected by QAnon. But the big difference, in fact, there's this great quote from this guy. You've heard of the Rothschilds, of course?
Bakers.
This guy wrote a very good book about QAnon. His name is Mike Rothschild, and he hastens to add that he's not a member of the infamous Rothschild family. But he says in the bad old days, if you wanted to find out about conspiracism and hatred against Jews and others, you'd probably have to go to some sleazy, moldy bookstore and find some periodical, or maybe at a truck stop they had pamphlets. Now it's just one click away on the internet, and again, you can get all kinds of narcissistic nutrients by having the most transgressive postings on the internet. So now it can be communicated at almost the speed of light.
So the QAnon people, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, all those people who are active in the insurrection,
yes,
they all share a belief that Jews and feminists and are the who are the bad guys?
One common theme, of course, is this misogyny that we macho males like me, of course, we've been feminized, and
Josh Hawley says that.
We've due to the conspirators, of course, they've really emasculated us and feminized us and turned us into pussies. So.
And the conspirators are Jewish feminists, or Jews and feminists, or just...
Well, it varies. Jews in conspiracism are almost always the default position. So it's Jews, but Bill Gates also gets involved, of course, in vaccinating people. And if you had a vaccination, you probably know that Bill Gates has implanted nanochips in you from the vaccination. And right now, as we speak, he has nothing better to do than to monitor us up in Seattle, and he's getting... So, start this with a quote from one of the early church fathers. I think it was Tertullian, and I think I got it right in the Latin. Credo Q absurdum, the more absurd, the more believable.
Wow.
So, and that goes in with the Gnosticism that I'm not getting much visibility if I had seen posting, wow, Gail, do you know that this congressman took money from Chevron, and boring. But did you know that Hillary Clinton is a witch and that she kidnaps babies and drinks their blood and
in underground chambers, yeah.
yeah, at the Comet Pizza Parlor in Washington. And, they're also, of course, involved with the Jews. One of your favorites, the new Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor. You know about some of her postings?
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well,
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, sorry. I'll quote this in the preface that she had posted some time ago. This was about the fire in Paradise, and this was caused by Jews, of course, by the
shooting
Rothschild.
laser beams.
Yes, who had some sort of laser beam drone or something, and for some reason the Rothschilds and other Jewish bankers wanted to burn down the town of Paradise.
There's nothing there. Why would anybody care about Paradise? It's just pine trees.
I was asking, so what is this about this retirement community? But you have this explanation, which is really exciting, rather than saying PG disregard for public life and obsession with profit. Well, that's kind of boring. That's what you see on PBS. But if you really want to get people excited and create an adrenaline rush, oh yeah, the Jews in secret spacecrafts and magical beings.
I mean, if you're going to shoot laser beams, wouldn't you do it strategically? There's really nothing in Paradise but pine trees and retirement people. I mean, why don't you do some kind of, I don't know, if you think that Hollywood is a den of iniquity, why don't you beam a studio or something?
Yeah, there's some people speculate, well, maybe these conspiracists are worried about the route for the California Rapid Transit. They had somehow determined that they're going to put trains through Paradise for some reason. It shows the power of imagination.
Yeah. Okay, do you have hope, or is it getting worse? Where are we headed with this?
Well, I'm thinking, I was going to write to somebody today about this phrase I did from Kafka, there is infinite hope, but not for us. So I've become maybe incautiously pessimistic. In fact, the study I'm working on now is about the strangeness of the world. You've heard the old, the cliche from historians, the past is a foreign country.
Mm-mm.
They do, anyway, my latest will be the present is a foreign country, how strange the world has become. Almost something ineffable about it.
So you think we're on a downward spiral of more crazy, more crazy, more crazy?
Yeah, I think so. What's your sense?
Well, what I'm looking at as really crucial is the Secretary of State elections in the fall with the Republican nominees who are bound and determined to change an election if a Republican doesn't win.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And if those people win, then we're in big trouble. And I heard something on NPR. They said even if one state like Georgia has a Secretary of State who's willing to change the elections, that could throw the whole thing into chaos. So to me, that's the most volatile and scary. But I don't think Trump would get elected again. He didn't get elected last time. I don't know why he would again. I hope he runs because I don't think he'll get elected. So I think the Secretary of State candidates are the scariest.
I think that's very adroit, yeah. Need to be more attentive to that because that's where the action, the travesty is going to occur. I think you're quite right. Yeah.
Do you think Biden will or should run again?
Well, I don't know. It's a better alternative to Trump.
Well,
He's
yeah.
kind of ultra-moderate neoliberal. He's tried to push through some decent policies. You'd like to think that if more Supreme Court appointments become available, one of his people would be preferable to what we have now.
Oh boy, that's
you may have heard about some of the recent actions of the Supreme Court. It's probably not news to you. Yeah. So he's in some ways a more decent human being.
Oh yeah.
But that's kind of a low bar in terms of policy. He wants to do something about climate. He was a pretty good union guy, but the Congress, of course, is rather obstructionistic. You and I probably don't appreciate the ageism against the guy, given that we're chronologically challenged.
Yeah, the Fox News people, they say I don't know why they say this, that he's, deranged or got dementia or something. He's perfectly articulate. I mean, he was a stutterer as a child. He sometimes hesitates to find a word, but I don't know where they get how they can think he's demented.
No, well, of course they make stuff up naturally.
So, in terms of the climate crisis, you've written about nuclear power. That's kind of a controversial issue because some people say we don't want nuclear power because of the hazards like Chernobyl, but other people say, hey, it's better than oil. It's not doesn't pollute in the same ways. What's your thinking now in 2022?
Well, yeah, actually, my book on nuclear issues is about nuclear strategizing and the possibilities of nuclear war, and so I wouldn't claim that I've thoroughly studied this issue and have some expertise about this, but as you know, that wouldn't stop me from talking about it. No, I think the dangers of nuclear power plants are quite evident. Nuclear waste material stays radioactive for maybe 200,000 years, and there's a big issue about where to bury the stuff and to what extent it's going to get at the groundwater. And there was Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, so it's a very dangerous technology.
So are you saying we should just let it be, let it phase out?
Well, yeah, the plant in Sacramento got phased out, and actually the one down here in San Diego,
San Onofre?
San Onofre, yeah. Or they built a plant, I think, in San Luis Obispo on an earthquake fault. That one's still working. But it's very dangerous technology to play with, and there have been accidents. So something could be said about more efficiency and alternative energy. And at least Biden has some interest in that, solar and wind power.
Yeah.
More public transportation.
Right. I'm really interested in the title of your 1997 Prager book, What If They Gave a Crisis and Nobody Came? Interpreting International Crises. That was like that old bumper sticker, What If They Gave a War and Nobody Came? I just think that's so profound.
That's where I looked at the title from.
Yeah, it's really profound.
Well, yeah, this is when I spent a sabbatical. You're asking how I had opportunities for research. Well, I had sabbaticals and time off, so I spent one sabbatical at down here at UC San Diego in their program in conflict and cooperation. So it was a really good opportunity to do this research. What I did is take a look at 2 international crises. One, of course, I'm sure you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the world came very close to full-scale thermonuclear war. In fact, in one of his last talks, Robert McNamara, then Secretary of State, said that, I don't know if you can see, he said came this close to a full-scale nuclear holocaust, and Robert Kennedy was right. And my brother was so depressed because he thought the nuclear holocaust was about to happen, and he felt real bad about the children of the world being destroyed, who had nothing to do with it. What a sweetheart. So this difference in promoting crisis and crisis management is something that really caught my attention. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which is an indelible memory for people like us. This was, I call it, Kennedy's existential crisis. He had to prove himself to be some hero in the manner of an ancient Greek. So there's a lot of work I do there about mythology and metaphors. This was a chance to really make a name for himself, even though by all accounts, and I listened to the tapes at the Kennedy Library, so I did a lot of thorough research and talked to people about this, and by all accounts, nobody thought that the missiles in Cuba in any way enhanced the Soviet strategic ability to strike the United States. They already had missiles that could strike the United States.
With subs, from submarines.
From submarines and land-based missiles and aircraft. So, there's bad news and good news. The bad news is the Soviets are about to obliterate the United States. Well, what's the good news? Oh, it's not coming from Cuba. It's coming from their submarines or from the Eurasian landmass. Oh, I feel better about it now. It could have been coming from Cuba. Yeah. So I contrast that with a crisis you probably never heard about, the Cienfuegos Bay crisis in 1971. And that's when, not that I'm an uncritical champion of Nixon, it's happened during the Nixon-Kissinger administration. It turned out, oh my God, the Soviets weren't keeping their word, imagine, and they were building a nuclear submarine base in Cuba, and Kissinger saying, oh shit, the nuclear submarines can strike the United States. This is much worse than the old Cuban Missile Crisis, the Kennedy administration, because the submarines are, 80 miles offshore, and the missiles can strike the United States in a matter of seconds. So he's frantic. He's almost incontinent. Well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, maybe. Well, I don't know. But he goes to Nixon and says, you got to do something about this. The Soviet nuclear submarines. And, the curious thing about this it wasn't a Nixon-style crisis, and Nixon didn't do anything about it. He kind of ignored it. Just kind of blew it off. And why is that? Why was it a Nixon-style crisis? Well, you read about Nixon-style crisis in his book called Six Crises. And Nixon-style crisis, and here, remember the play Death of a Salesman?
Arthur Miller.
Willie Loman. Yeah. Nixon is kind of a Willie Loman. Nixon-style crisis is where he takes it very personally, and somebody's humiliating him. So the famous, did you ever hear the Checker speech? It's wonderful. Somebody accused Nixon's candidate of pilfering campaign funds and maligning him personally, his personal integrity, which would be easy enough. Supposedly he accepted a gift, a Cocker Spaniel puppy named Checkers, and in this model, and you ought to Google it sometime if you haven't seen this. It's vintage Nixon. He's saying, no matter what people say, I'm not going to take the Cocker Spaniel puppy out of the little girl's arms and return it, even though it was a gift that maybe I should have reported. But this is a Nixon-style crisis where he's personally maligned, or in the Kremlin, he has a big fight with old man Khrushchev, and Khrushchev points his finger, just points at Nixon's chest and says, we're going to outlast you, we're going to outdo you, you don't know. So the worst Nixon crisis, he said, as vice president, it's kind of laughable. He said a goodwill tour of South America, and Nixon writes in his Sixth Crisis, these weirdos didn't like me very much. They started pelting my limousine with rotten eggs and tomatoes. Now that's a Nixon-style crisis, where people are making fun of him and calling him Tricky Dick. But no, international relations, that's a Nixon-style crisis. So I conclude it was better to have every man, to have Willie Loman in office than a wannabe hero like Kennedy.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, I think that was some of my best writing. I still maybe we should do something with that book.
Yeah, it's really crucial. Um, let's see. You also wrote about voting rights, RITES. What
Oh
that's really
yeah,
pertinent
yeah.
to what's
That's.
happening.
I hope that's not going to happen with you, Gail. But I've actually lost friends when they've asked me about that book.
Hmm.
Uh, in some ways, it's a real flair for the obvious. I started with a paraphrase on a Woody Allen movie. Did you ever see his cartoon movie Ants?
Mm-mm.
It's really good. Well, he plays part of a worker ant, and the ant is going to a shrink, of course, which is, of course, vintage Woody Allen. And he says, I feel so insignificant. I'm a child in a family of 2 million here, and nobody pays attention to me. Nobody cares about me. And the psychiatrist says, well, you are insignificant. So I'm glad you realize that. You have quite an insight. And so it is with, I argue, with your single vote, particularly in a national election in mass society, where you have an electorate of 70 million, 100 million people, the chance that your single vote cast in secret, and I use in another book, this guy talks about voting very much like using a public toilet, um, which is a little bit degrading for this awfully important ritual. But you go into a private room, close the door, and in private, you pull a handle and you don't tell anybody about it. Nobody's supposed to know. Not completely incommensurate with the voting booth. But the mathematics are, painfully obvious. The thought that your single vote, especially in the national, and putting aside the electoral college and all the other machinations that occur, that your single vote is going to make any difference in the outcome of the national election. You have a much better chance of winning the lottery. And I even go into some of the statistical machinations of some MIT professors who know a lot more about math than I do, since I didn't get much past long division.
But the point is that it's a group phenomena. If like it used to be that young people were not likely to vote, but since Obama, they're more likely to vote, and their turnout elected Joe Biden in like 3 or 4
Yeah,
states. So
that
it's a
said,
group phenomena.
you're quite right, and that's a good caveat to mention. Uh, I do, of course, mention that if somehow you can persuade hundreds of thousands or millions of people to vote a certain way, then you have some efficacy. And I quote some oil plutocrats and other people say, well, of course I don't vote. I gave $500,000 to this campaign, and they use this money to manufacture consent and get vote. So if you have the power, if you get on the network, you have a lot of money and visibility, and you can get, well, particularly in a city council election or something like that, or a department election, if you can persuade, well, yeah, of course. There's this whole thing, of course. Well, to what extent do the elected officials carry through in their promises? That's another matter. But this is about a single vote, and what can you expect from casting or not casting a single vote?
I think there's an urban legend that Hitler won some early election by 1 vote or something like that. I don't know if that's a myth.
I never heard about that. That does happen sometimes. I think it happened over in Oroville in some county election in our area.
But the
Some
fact
won
that
by
that the ultra right is so adamant about restricting the votes of poor people, people of color, young people, means they think that the
yeah.
vote has an impact
Well, in the aggregate, of
in the
course, yeah,
aggregate.
yeah. So I'm not denying that an
Right,
aggregate can make a difference.
right.
But this is the more existential problem. What is the predicament of a single voter? I argue that once upon a time, or maybe still is, That's where the idea of rite comes in and ritual, and this is something you've looked into probably more deeply than I have in terms of religious studies, the role of ritual in religion, taking communion, all the surplus symbolism that goes along with that, and being part of community, or with Durkheim saying that to sound really erudite here and give us some heaviosity, religion is really the worship of your group. And as we look upon it, unless you're, you have a dog.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep, I have a puppy. I'll show her to you closer up later.
Oh, okay, great. I'd like to see it. In any case, taking communion has great ritualistic importance. Makes people feel much better. Curiously, I may talk about this. I don't know if you have much time with this, but I really like the Episcopal Church down the street here. I go there some Sundays. Me, the boy who sang so beautifully at his bar mitzvah, but I don't take communion, of course. As I told one of the priests there, I really like going to your services. I like the ritual, I like the atmosphere here, but I don't believe in the Nicene Creed. And I said, well, that's okay. So I'll even go and get a blessing from a priest, not communion, and that feels kind of nice sometimes on Sunday. So voting can give you this. I call it affective gratification of ritual, and I'm sure you're well tuned to that. Or it can be damned entertaining, such as, hey, I get to go to the guys' Super Bowl Sunday, we're going to watch our team, and that's great fun. We hope our team wins, but nobody's delusional about thinking that because I'm watching and cheering for our team, and I vote for the Green Bay Packers back in this, that it's going to make any difference, but it's fun. And you get a sense of community. And with voting, it might even make you feel better. But to think that one vote makes a difference, and this offends a lot of people. Because, well, going back to Woody Allen, they want to think that they do make a difference. And I'm sorry about the mathematics of Math Society, but it ain't my fault.
Yeah, but you vote, right?
No.
Oh. It's
So
really,
now
I
we're not
voted every time.
Now we're not friends. How come you vote?
I just vote Democratic ticket.
Okay. Well, I could see it in a municipal election where there are relatively small numbers of people, and there the vote can make a difference, and I probably should do that. Or in department elections when we've been politicking, and you wouldn't know anything about department politics, of course. But there, we elected the chair. We won it by one vote. It made a difference in that venue.
Yeah,
of
right.
Course.
Well, you're right. It's a math thing. It's an aggregate thing. You've done a lot of research and writing about terrorism, and what's interesting to me about that is that autocrats like Orban in Hungary, Trump in the U.S. use terrorism as an excuse to cut off liberties. They say, "Oh, we have to do that because of the terrorists."
Oh, with 9/11 here, of course. My Muslim friend knows more about that than he cares to, yeah.
Right. So they're still using that around the world.
Well, there's great irony in terms of the sanctimonious opposition to terrorism on the part of American officials. In the book, I mentioned World War II. World War II, what American officials, such as Curtis LeMay and many, many other officials in the war effort, what they referred to as terrorism was lauded as a winning strategy. Curtis LeMay, you've heard of him, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was directing the what he called the terror raids, the firebombing on, he and McNamara orchestrated what they called the terror firebombing of Tokyo, And of course, there was also on the other side of the war, Dresden and Hamburg. And they explicitly talked about terror bombing as the winning tactic for the war. Or then later on during the Cold War, there was a celebration in the premier establishment journal, Foreign Affairs. I did my homework here, so celebrating nuclear terror. That due to nuclear terror, because to paraphrase a little bit, the Soviets are scared shitless about credible American nuclear arsenal. That has kept the peace. So thank God for nuclear weapons, because the threat of nuclear terror, nuclear terrorism, has kept the peace. So these people are celebrating victory, World War II, due to what they call terrorism. They're celebrating peace due to what they call terrorism. I'm not putting words in it. These are the terms that they use. And they're talking about serious terror. Then suddenly some incidents happen where some marginal groups hijack airlines, and of course 9/11, and suddenly terror in the hands of other people becomes the worst imaginable sin. I think I even get some classics in here about the who was it? Thucydides writing about some of the wars, where he said, well, given the power of the Athenian military, I'm paraphrasing, of course, we have the ability to, put it, it's more eloquent than this, but we can impose our will on whomever we want, and it's futile for them to even fight back. It's a much more quotable phrase, and so I don't remember at the moment, but at this age, memory can be one of the second things to go, but won't go into that right now. But seriously, the idea is that, who was it that the Greeks were concerned? We had the power, and they had to put up with it at the end of the story, just to paraphrase it in short. So this was U.S. terrorism policy, World War II, Korean War, the Vietnam War, Indochina War. We have the power to impose our weapons, such as napalm, on people, and too bad they just had to put up with it. So it's back to old Thucydides' political realism again. You see why I call my research kind of humanistic approaches to social inquiry. I try to bring in some of the mythology and so forth. So it's interesting. Terrorism is lauded when the U.S. uses it, and Chomsky writes a great deal about the U.S. being the prime terrorist nation. But when other people who are supposed to put up with it use it not to condone terrorism, but then it's the most unconscionable evil in the entire world.
Do you have another book in mind after Jews and Muslims in the white supremacist imagination?
I do. And
what a surprise.
Again, I was mentioning this briefly earlier. The present is a foreign country, the strangeness of the world. And I was tempted to start with this anecdote which you've noticed in Chico. You been around campus lately?
Not really.
No, I haven't either. But I remember one time just walking up to campus. There's an all-night market on, on Broadway. There's a gas station and an all-night market there. And when I was walking through campus a couple blocks away, I said, this is wonderful. Here's some refrains from Mozart concertos. They're playing that outside on their speakers.
Oh, it's to keep the homeless away.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I thought, oh, that's great. And someone said, oh, no.
There's the irony. This is to keep the homeless and teenage punks away.
Yeah. Right.
I wonder if,
So how does that lead to your next book?
well, just a sense of strangeness about the world. Turning, well, for example, I was even going to have some meditation of my own mortality. This is the thing that I mentioned to you when we first started. What got me into philosophy in the first place, I didn't like the idea of dying, of being food for worms, of dark nothingness, except it wouldn't even be dark, it would just be nothingness, of everlasting oblivion, and all these other cheery, morbid thoughts. So that in itself gives me a sense of strangeness, and of course, many people have written about this, and no doubt you've read many of the lamentations yourself about the predicament of mortality, the denial of death. That book made quite an impression on me.
Mostly what I read is research into children who have memories of their past lives and people who communicate with people on the other side and do really good research. So my focus is not on lamenting it, but on learning what happens to the next stage of the journey.
Yeah, of course, being an evangelical agnostic, I'm not sure.
Well, the University of Arizona, of Virginia's Perceptual Studies Division they must have almost 3,000 accounts of children who remember very detailed memories of past lives.
That'd be worth looking into.
Yeah, it really is. And there's all kinds of interesting things, like about a third of them have a birthmark that is symbolic of how they died. Like if a bullet wound went in their neck, they have a birthmark at their neck. So there's all kinds of interesting spin-offs. Like some of the children who are gender questioning were the other gender in their previous life. A lot of these children died suddenly and violently. Like one of the most detailed accounts I've read is a little boy who was shot down over, I guess, an island during World War II, and he remembers the name of the plane and the name of the co-pilot, and he was James the Third because he was James III. So I think that's what I'm reading about more than fearing
that's
it.
one of the I don't know if it's the obvious, but as I said, I'm an evangelical agnostic, so I'm not a militant atheist. I have a lot of trouble with the militant atheists. The presumption that they have the answer, the final answer to all the cosmic questions, and so I don't know. I guess there'll come a time when I may find out.
An interesting book to read is from who is a formerly skeptical Harvard neurosurgeon, Eben Alexander. He was in a coma from some kind of brain disease where his brain turned to pus, and he remembered very vivid spiritual visions he had while he was essentially dead, and he believes that those are actually other dimensions that we can experience after death. Only in those near-death experiences, they experience it and then come back.
Yeah, just going back to I was just grateful when they would have near-life experiences. One time in class, I used to team teach with Rich, and he offered fact, which was obviously an interdisciplinary class about science and human values, and some of the students were pretty lethargic, and you get out this mirror and we go around and see if they still had breath. each of the students hoping for a near-life experience.
Oh, God.
But you can see, though, why the sense of mortality can evoke a sense of strangeness about the world. I don't know how much of an issue I want to make out of that, because going back to what I was saying earlier, that's almost one of these more cosmological questions. But in terms of my studies of warfare, there's something very strange indeed. Once upon a time, World War II, there were great efforts to demonize the enemy. The notion is that well, to kill these people, especially civilians, they have to be demonized. And horrific things were done in terms of propaganda against the Japanese. Not so much against the Germans, because they're too much like us in some ways. But the strange thing is that kind of propaganda ended with the death of, ended with FDR. Because in the post-World War II world, this is where the sense of strangeness comes in, it's no longer necessary to demonize enemies. In fact, the enemies are depicted as our friends. But there's still plans made and efforts done to slaughter them in large numbers. The Cold War, of course, the Soviet Union, every Cold War administration, I hope I'm not sounding too didactic here, everyone had Congress pass a resolution called the Captive Nations Resolution. Oh my God, we feel so sorry for these people behind the Iron Curtain. They're, to no fault of their own, they're captives of these horrible dictators, Stalin and much worse, captive nations. We pray for them. We in Congress urge you to pray for the... well, this is going on, I guess, across the river, the Potomac. Plans are made for nuclear incineration with these strategic integrated operational plans to kill how many hundreds of millions of citizens behind the Iron Curtains. But they're our friends, but we don't want to... And then, of course, there was Vietnam. Well, of course we're friends with the Vietnamese people, and we're going to kill them anyway. Or Bush and Iraq. Bush administration, let's pronounce it correctly, in fact, much to his credit, after 9/11, he urged that people shouldn't have hatred against Muslims. He had the Eid ceremonies during Ramadan, you know about those?
Yeah.
Even held those. And the Iraqi people are our friends. You see, their problem is the cruel dictator Hussein. But nevertheless, we're going to kill hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. The most odious was the interview with Madeleine Albright during the sanctions, which and the destruction of the Iraqi infrastructure. Well, here's what we do to our Iraqi friends. We destroy their infrastructure, prevent them from getting treated for curable diseases. The UN estimates that due to U.S. policy, 500,000 Iraqi children may have died due to this. So this is all quoted on 60 Minutes. Madeleine Albright quotes, well, Madam Secretary, what do we say about the UN? 500,000 innocent lives perish due to your policy? So what does she say? Well, it was a tough decision, but we think we've done the right thing. So this strikes me as a little bit strange. No efforts made to demonize the Iraqi people are our friends. The Soviet people are our friends. So this has caught my attention for a long time. I want to pursue this next. It's very peculiar about why are we killing our friends.
Or prepare to kill our friends.
Or preparing, yeah.
What have we left out? A lot, but anything you want to end with?
Well, there are my 4 Nobel Prizes, but I don't want to brag about. Well, you know how to interview. You're very astute at it. What kind of got you embarrassing questions would you like to ask me?
Anything you'd do over again if you could?
What can I do over again? Well, I try to be more serious about my education, and sometimes I didn't take advantage of all the opportunities and to really dig in. I mentioned I regret not spending more time with my son when he was very young. Trying to think what I'll do over again. Maybe, it's veto, but maybe I don't know if I would have been happier. I'm not sure. It's tempting to say, well, would have worked harder and published more things and gone to more elite schools and taught at a better university, some or some elite. But having listened to myself saying that, what comes to mind is Dostoevsky's definition of a human being, something that walks on two legs and feels ungrateful. So I ought to be, this is what I ought to do. Here's what I should do. I should be more grateful for the very charmed life that I have and the great family. And even though I'll kind of bitch and moan about Chico State being daycare, it made some very good friends there, opportunities to publish, and have a very prosperous retirement. This is about retirement. So I have a very prosperous upper middle class life now.
How
Can I
often do you
can I
get?
ask you the same question?
I have to think about that.
Yeah,
How
pleasure.
often do you see your doctor son in the Bay Area? Because you're at different ends of the state.
Oh, well, we're journey up in Cuban. He's going to come down here in a few weeks. He has trophy parents, of course, so he wants to see us. Oh, maybe about once a month.
Oh, great. That's good.
Yeah, very, very proud of him. He's done very well. And he's turned out to be a great kid, too. So it's kind of funny, turning to my son for medical advice. But I have many consultations with him. And he's looking out for me, and he's advising me to be a little more careful about what I eat. And,
Good. I'm glad to hear a doctor who thinks about diet and not just prescriptions
oh,
and
yeah.
surgery.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you.